Hi, everybody. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So, before I get into the lecture for today, I want to write down where each group is sitting so I can memorize your guys' faces better. So group A is here, right? Okay. Where's group B? Okay. Where's group C? Got it. Group D. Okay. Group E. Gotcha. Group F. Okay. Group G. Okay. And group H. Gotcha. Group I. Okay. Group J. Got it. And I think K and L, there are no K and L, right? J is the last one. Yep. Okay. So, before I get into the lecture, we have a writing assignment due this week. And that a couple of you did it already, so I'll take what you did. But I had a specific goal in mind for the writing assignment. I want everybody in here to write a cover letter for a theoretical job that you're applying for. It could be an actual job, could be just hypothetical, but I want you to write a cover letter for a job application and email that to me as an attachment. So that assignment is due by the end of this weekend. Yes?
If we already had one, like a job we used, can you send me that one?
Yeah.
Just modify it, maybe? Just put his name.
Huh?
I'm just going to put here, you just said it or something.
Yeah, I don't want you to reinvent the wheel, so if you've already written one that you're particularly fond of or you're using a lot, then send that to me.
So it's due on Thursday?
Huh? It's due the end of the weekend.
That's that Sunday.
Yeah.
What's a cover letter?
Huh?
What's a cover letter?
A cover letter is the cover letter is the letter that you write to a potential employer that you attach on top of your resume.
What if we're self-employed?
Then write one as if you were looking for a job.
Okay.
Okay?
In the field that we're in?
Whatever kind of job
Just whatever.
if your photography business tanks tomorrow, what kind of job would you apply for?
Photography job.
Okay, there you go. Then
Okay.
apply for something in the photography business. Other questions? Yes. No, my regular email. Other questions? Okay. Yes. Huh? One page. Yes. Huh? The cover letter is the writing assignment. Whoa. Ow.
So just like a resume.
Okay, so the lecture for today is on business level strategy, and this is really all about customers and different ways of measuring customers, of focusing on customers. for the business. So if I go back to the handbook model again, pretty much the first lecture dealt with everything up to here, and then all the lectures through lecture number 7, I think, are up here in the strategic analysis quadrant of this model, and then the last 2 lectures, or the last 3 lectures, are going to be about supporting organizational arrangements. So just kind of putting things in perspective from the original handbook model lecture, and then putting things in perspective from your textbook. Vision and mission is chapter 1. Chapter 2 and chapter 3, external and internal environments, we did lectures on last week and the week before. Last week we talked about Globus, and then we did the case analysis. Today we'll talk about business level strategy. Then next week we'll talk about competitive rivalry. After that we'll talk about corporate level strategy, which will also include information on acquisition and restructuring. Then we'll talk about international strategy. Then we will switch over to talk about corporate governance and organizational structure and controls. And that's kind of how the rest of the lectures will go. So business level strategy, it's a coordinated set of actions used to exploit core competencies and gain competitive advantages. And like I said, the way that I've structured this lecture, the way I like to focus for business level strategy is all about customers. So when you're evaluating your customers, there's key business level strategy issues about what kind of product you want to focus on. Do you want to focus on low cost or differentiation? What kind of customer niches are you looking for? So you're asking yourself, who is served? Who is the customer that you're providing goods and services for? What need do they have that you're satisfying? And how exactly are you satisfying that need? So switching away from sort of big picture strategy issues, this is all about quantifying and examining your relationship with your customers. So this is a nice overview of different ways that you can segment the customer market. There's an example here of Connecticut as a travel destination. So the product would be tourism in Connecticut. But before we get to that example, there's all kinds of different criteria that you can use to segment your customers. The first being, are they consumers or are they businesses? Everything else about the way that you gather information about customers, the way that you quantify that in numbers, starts with whether they're consumers or businesses. So if they're consumers, there's a number of different factors that you use to further quantify what the different niches and segments of your customers are. So demographic factors are important to consider, things like age, income, gender, occupation. Socioeconomic factors such as social class or stage in the family life cycle. Are they just newly married, or are they just having kids, or are they kids in grade school, or are they families with kids in high school? Are they families where the kids are already out to college, out of the house? What kind of stage in the family life cycle is the customer? Important to know so that you can quantify how many other customers there are out there like the one that you're looking at. Geographic factors, so differences in cultures, differences in regional or national characteristics important to consider. So the number one question to ask is where. The most important thing before you get down to cultural, regional, and national differences is just be clear in your mind, where is your customer? Are they in Kern County? Are they in the state of California? Are they in the west of the United States? Are they nationwide in the United States? Are they worldwide? Are there different niches depending on whether it's North America or South America? Think about where your customer is and different types of customers that are in different places. Psychological factors, so lifestyle and personality traits, things that your customer likes to do with their spare time. Things like whether they tend to be outgoing or tend to be more closed off. Do they tend to be heavy consumers of information, or they tend to be people who make decisions relatively quickly based on a little bit of information? What is their personality like? What is their lifestyle like? Consumption patterns, heavy, moderate, and light users. So you want to have an idea of how often your customers use your product or service. Is this the kind of thing where they use it every week? Do they make a purchasing decision once a month? Is it a one-off kind of thing where this happens once a year or once every couple of years? How often do your customers consume your product or service? And then perceptual factors, benefit segmentation, perceptual mapping. How do customers perceive your brand? Do they perceive it as a standing for product quality? Does it stand for sort of innovation excellence? Does it stand for dependability? What kind of characteristics do customers associate with your company's brand name? And how are the different benefits that they derive from your product or service categorizable in different segments? So those are kind of the factors that you consider if you're looking at consumer market. If you're looking at companies as your customer rather than consumers, probably the first and most important thing to know is what industry is your target company in. So we talked in external analysis all about NAICS.com, the North American Industrial Classification System, and those 6-digit numbers that correspond with different industries and different types of businesses. So you want to know what 6-digit code corresponds to your customers, or which. It could be more than one code, but what industries are your customers in? Product segments. So based on technological differences or production economics, are there different uses of your technology based on different uses of your product or service based on the technological factors it has. So if we look at Globus as an example for a second, are there different companies that buy UAV drones as opposed to entry-level cameras? Probably yes. So what's the difference in the type of technology that your customers use from you? Geographic segments defined by boundaries between countries or by regional differences within them. Again, where is your target business located? Is it in California? Are we talking about businesses in the western half of the United States? Are we talking about businesses in the Southwest? Are we talking about businesses in North America? Are we talking about businesses in North America and Latin America, but those being two different markets? Where are your customers? Common buying factor segments. So these cut across product markets and geographic segments. Are there certain things that a business considers when they buy your product? Is there a segment that's looking at price really heavily? Is there another segment that's looking at the quality of your? If we go back to Globus again, is there a business that's looking at the screen quality of your cameras? That's what they care about. They don't care about the price as much as they care about having at least a certain resolution, because they need that for their operations of their business. So are there common buying factors between or among different businesses that are your customers? And then finally, customer size segments. Do your customers tend to be 10 to 20 person businesses? Are we talking about 1 to 5 person micro businesses? Are we talking about businesses that are hundreds of thousands of employees? Are we talking about governments? Are we talking about sort of large but not immense businesses which have maybe tens of thousands of employees? Are we talking about 1,000-person companies? How many people? How large are the companies that your product or service is targeted towards? So, as an example of one particular segmentation of the consumer market, like I said before, it's a model for Connecticut as a travel destination, and it's got demographic variables, geographic variables, psychographic or psychological variables, and behavioral variables, behavioral variables are sort of in the socioeconomic category here for our prior example. So demographically, the sample or the example here is targeting women ages 35 to 54 with household incomes of $65,000 or more. So those are numbers that we can measure easily by looking at the U.S. Census Bureau or other publicly available sources of information on market size. So age and household income, the two things that are important and gender. So we're talking about female customers, sort of middle to late middle aged, with a household income of $65,000 or more. Geographically, we're targeting the New York metropolitan area. So Connecticut's rather close as a weekend destination, as a place to get away from the New York area. So we're not talking about like customers in Texas or customers in California or customers in Europe or in South America. We're just talking about customers in the New York metropolitan area. Psychographically, people who like to travel. So that's not so much something we can get from the Census Bureau, but we can get that by surveying a certain number of customers. There's available market surveys that you can find on Google that talk about the percentage of the population that's interested in certain things. You can also relatively cheaply with social media, you can do your own survey of the customer segment and get an idea of the percentage of people among the whole metropolitan area of New York who like to travel. And then finally, behavioral variables, people who take 2 or more getaway trips a year with family or friends. So again, this isn't something that we can get from the Census Bureau, but it's something we can get by surveying customers. So if we were to ask a certain sample population of the New York area how often they travel for weekend getaways, then we can get an idea of what the percentage of the population is takes 2 or more getaway trips per year with family and friends for the weekend. And that's starting with the demographic variables and narrowing down as we get more and more specific. So there's women aged 35 to 54 with $65,000 household incomes all over the world. We're narrowing that by just women 35 to 54, 65K or above in New York. And then among that segment, not all of those women like to travel. So we're just looking at those women among that group who like to travel. And then finally, it's not just people who like to travel, but maybe they go once every 2 or 3 years. We're looking for people who go at least for 2 getaway trips a year or more. So narrowing down the focus and having a very specific idea and concept of who our target customer is for the business level strategy. Another way of looking at this is something called the customer vignette. This is something I've come up with for my small business management and entrepreneurship classes. It's another way of understanding your sample customers. So again, the first question is the same as that last sheet. Is it a consumer or a business? I'd also ask, is it a customer or an influencer? A lot of times, some of your key customers are not necessarily people who use your service. They're people who will tell other people about your service. So you want to make sure to have particularly keen understanding of who are the customers out there, or who are the businesses or individuals out there who are willing to say good things about your company to other people. That's an influencer. A customer, an individual customer is one thing. An influencer is a different type of animal, and you want to make sure to distinguish between the two when you're developing customer vignettes. There's 6 pieces of information that are really important to know about any target customer, whether it's a business or an individual person. Their purchase frequency, so how often. This is similar to we were talking about consumption patterns back here. Same kind of thing in this customer vignette. How often do they purchase the product or service that you offer? Very important. What price are they willing to pay? All of the rest of your calculations for market size, for potential revenues, for the financial pro formas of your business, all of that is determined by what price point your customers are willing to pay. So make sure you understand what price for your product or service, what's the lowest, what's the highest, what's the range of prices that your customers are willing to pay. Very important as well, what advertising media do they use? So when you design a marketing campaign to reach out to customers, it's important to know, do they pay attention to TV? Do they pay attention to radio ads? Do they pay attention to posts on Facebook? Do they just pay attention to what their friends say about recommendations for product or service? Would they respond to emails that they got in their inbox? Are there certain websites that they go to frequently that they would pay attention to advertisements on those websites? Would they do a Google search and click on the businesses that come up on the right-hand side of that Google search for solutions to a certain product need? What advertising media do they pay attention to? That's going to help you build your entire marketing plan afterwards, is understanding the media consumption profile of your target customers. So very important to know as well. Also important to know, what competitors do they use? So if they don't use your product, what other products do they use? So if it's toothpaste, if you're Crest, you want to know how many people are using Colgate now, how many people are using Arm & Hammer now. Or if it's not Colgate or Arm & Hammer, what are the other toothpastes that they use? What are the main competitors that you're up against? Demographic factors, just like on the other page, we want to know gender, age, income level, occupation, where people live, where people work. Or if it's a business, we want to know what industry they're in, how many customers they have, geographically where they're located, and geographically where they do business, where their customers are located. And then finally, general impressions. You want to know. You want to have the ability in a customer vignette, in addition to all of the specific questions that we have about how often do you buy, what price do you buy at, what advertising media do you consume, what other competitors do you use, and what are your demographic characteristics. We want the opportunity for people to just give general impressions. So it might be that we were targeting all of these factors towards women in, like the women in the 35 to 54 age group, for soap products, for example. And when we actually just let them say whatever they think about the product or service, they tell us, yeah, a lot of times I buy it for my kids. So it's important to have the opportunity to get general impressions, because it may change entirely how we're marketing or positioning the product with a certain customer segment. So make sure that there's sort of a free text, open text box for recording general impressions about the product or service as well. An example of what this looks like filled out, I've got one that my students did a couple of years ago for a project that we did for the Bakersfield Condors. This is using me as an example of a target customer. So in this case, I'm a consumer, not a business. I'm a potential influencer because I stand in front of classes like this. I talk to a lot of businesses in the community and do a lot of networking in the community, so I could potentially tell a lot of other people about how cool the Condors are and how much fun it is to go to a game. And then demographically, I'm what would be called the single adult male professional segment. Purchase frequency wise, I'm a season ticket holder. I have a 16, or I did last year have a 6-game package for the Condors. And in addition to that, I tend to go out for entertainment a couple times a month. It's important to understand. Substitute-wise, how often do people purchase as well? So the real competition for the Condors is not the other Condors team. There's only one hockey team in town. The competition is what else could you do with your time on a Friday night? If I don't go to the Condors game, I might go to a bar, I might go listen to live music, I might go to a movie. What are the other things that I like to do, and how often do I do that? So I go out a couple times a month for entertainment. Price point, I paid $300 for the 6-game package, and if I go out for a night out at a bar or a restaurant or going to the movies or something, I usually spend $100 to $200 a night. So that's for me and a date. And what's that?
I get time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that would include dinner and the movie. It's hard to spend $200 on a movie, but that's the pain point that I'm willing to pay on a Friday night. Advertising wise, I would listen to word of mouth. If I were, sometimes when I'm looking for new things to do in Bakersfield, I'll just go to Google and do a search there. If there's any Yelp reviews of bars or restaurants in the area, then I'll pay attention to Yelp reviews. If I get an email in my inbox for a Groupon or an announcement from a website that I signed up for a while back, I'll pay attention to those emails in my inbox. If I see a poster around campus or around downtown somewhere when I'm walking around, I'll pay attention to that. And if I get a brochure in my mailbox, I'll actually pay attention to that too. I might pay more attention. I probably pay more attention to a brochure in my mailbox than I do an email in my inbox, because I don't get that many brochures, and nobody sends brochures anymore. Everybody sends blurbs on email, so I tend to ignore a lot of the junk mail on email. But if I got a brochure for a new restaurant or a new live music venue here in Bakersfield, if I got that in my post office, like physical mailbox at my house, I'd probably pay more attention to that because it stands out. Not too many companies do that these days. Competitor-wise, if I'm not at a Condors game, I'm usually either at a local bar or restaurant, or I'm listening to live music. Demographically, I was 44, now I'm 45. I did this last year. 45 years old, single with no kids. I make a little over 6 figures for my salary. I'm a college professor. I live in Westchester, and I work here at CSUB. Those are all of those. If you have that information, you can go to the Census Bureau and figure out exactly how many other people there are like me in Bakersfield or in California or in the United States, just with that information right there. And then general impressions. I think it's really fun. I think it's kind of a cool small town experience, but it's still kind of linked to the outside world because the Condors are associated with the Edmonton Oilers, and so that gives us a connection to the National Hockey League and all that, but it's still kind of a cozy hometown experience. So that's kind of my general impression. With all that information that you have from the customer vignette or from the other market segmentation slide that we talked about, you're going to do market sizing after that. So first thing is to talk to sample customers, talk to a representative sample of the market, and get a good idea of who exactly is your customer. Once you know that, you can do market sizing and basically count quantitatively how many other customers are there out there, what are your expected revenues likely to be, so forth and so on. There's 3 things that you need in order to do market sizing. You need to choose a geographic scope. So all of the information that we have publicly available to do numbers is based on geographic area. So it can be Bakersfield, it can be Kern County, it can be the state of California, it can be the United States, it could be North America. It doesn't matter what the size, what the geographic scope is, but you need to choose that first off because it's going to affect the information that we get for the market sizing. You need a target customer demographic profile, so you need the customer vignette or the market segmentation model that you developed, that we talked about in those first couple slides. You need that, and you need a set of assumptions. You need to document, in particular, what your assumptions are. There's different kinds of assumptions. There's assumptions based on hard data. There's assumptions based on anecdotal evidence. And there's arbitrary assumptions based on educated guesses. So assumptions based on hard data. are based on going out to the internet, to the Census Bureau, or some other source of information that you find from Google or from our library databases. Some objective source of information where you've gotten numbers of some kind. That's an assumption based on hard data. Assumptions based on anecdotal evidence are usually information that you gathered from the information that you gathered through the questions that you asked for the customer vignette, or the survey questions that you asked when you put together your market segmentation model. It's not information that you got from an objective third-party source, but it's information that you got from asking other people questions. A lot of times, in the context of market sizing for this class, that is the price that people are willing to pay. So this could be the price people are willing to pay, how often they purchase, the fact that they like to travel. Those kinds of factors are based on a survey or a response of some kind that you've gotten by talking to customers. And then arbitrary assumptions based on educated guesses is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a ballpark or off the top of your head estimate based on some kind of logical criterion. So a lot of times in the context of this class, when I have you do market sizing, I have you identify a percentage of the market that you think you can get for your product or service, and that percentage of the market is usually based on how many competitors can you think of off the top of your head. So if I'm talking about that Condors example again, and off the top of my head I can think of 10 different places, or I can think of 5 different places that I like to go. The Firehouse, Sandrini's, I don't remember the last place I went to listen to. There's a place up in Bear Valley Springs that I like to go to listen to live music, and the Condors. So that's 5. If I can think of 5 off the top of my head, 100% divided by 5 is 20%. So if I can think of 5 competitors off the top of my head, then probably a realistic target is 20% of the market. So that's the kind of thing where you didn't hear a specific number from somebody that you surveyed or talked to when you're putting together a customer vignette, and you didn't find it. You didn't find it with the Census Bureau or some other publicly available database. You just guessed off the top of your head by some kind of logical criterion. You want to make sure to document when you're doing market sizing each of those assumptions. Just a couple of observations about the different kinds of data, or the different kinds of assumptions. Macro level economic data is rarely exactly what you want. You have to take what you can get. So we'll do an example in a little while here, looking at data from the Census Bureau. And the Census Bureau organizes things by certain types of reports. Reports on income level, reports on age level, and some of these reports are generated for they're generated for statistical purposes for government agencies. Other reports are generated for use by consumer products companies. They're different types of reports, the logic of which is only makes sense to the Census Bureau. So a lot of times you may be looking for information on how many women there are 35 to 54 with $65,000 a year salary. But you can't find exactly that number. You can find a report on how many women there are versus men. You can find a report on how many people there are in the society in general that have household incomes above $65,000. And you can get a report on how many people there are in general in the society who are age 35 to 54. So sometimes you're not going to get an exact report of women age 35 to 54 who are a certain income level. You're just going to have to use 3 different percentages and multiply them together as an estimate. So you got to take the reports that you can take as they come. Look for common demographic categories which are close to what you're looking for. So a lot of times occupation. So if we look at all of the statistics from the Census Bureau on occupation, you're not going to find anything that says college professor. There's a category that says education services, and that includes everything from college professors to kindergarten teachers and administrative staff to teachers. So it includes everybody in one big category, and that's the best you can do. So sometimes you have to pick the demographic category that's as close as possible to what you're looking for, and then make some assumptions about the percentage of that overall segment that are actually the type of customer that you want. And remember to adjust the macro level data according to your assumptions. So, like I said, if we found something on all education professionals, we got to make sure to multiply it by the percentage that we think are in higher education versus secondary or primary education. We have to multiply by a percentage of how many people we think are in administration versus teaching. At least those 2 adjustments we have to make to the number. Resources from our library for market sizing information. There's 2 main resources that we'll use for business to consumer, or it's actually gotten a little bit simpler because the Census Bureau has combined their information for businesses and consumers into one place. But I've put links in here to the relevant places in the Census Bureau's database. American Fact Finder and American Community Survey are 2 different entry portals to the same data at the Census Bureau. And then as far as business to consumer, there's a county business patterns database that the Census Bureau uses that has really great information on how many businesses there are in a certain industry of a certain size in a certain geographic area. So we usually use the Census Bureau's county business patterns database for business to business market sizing. An example of what a market sizing. This is actually one of the things in your case analysis template that I want you to put together in your groups. A market sizing example looks like this. This is what I want it to look like when you're done filling it out. An example for consumers, and I've got an example for businesses here too. So for consumers, first of all, you have to decide what the product or service is. That's you guys deciding amongst yourselves in the group what product or service do we want to focus on. In this example, it's single game tickets to the Condors, and that includes tickets, concessions, and souvenirs. So it's not just the price of the ticket, it's the money that people pay for ticket, drinks, food, and souvenirs all together at the game. The country or the geographic area, again, you choose the geographic area. In this case, it's Kern County, California. The customer profile, so your customer vignette that you put together of your target customers. You're going to use the information in that customer vignette and put it in here. So in the customer vignette, if you remember my like demographic information, I was a single adult male professional, age 40 to 50. So I'm 45, right in the middle of there, with an income level of 100,000 or above. So that's the customer target, and you're going to get that from the customer vignette that you put together. After that, you go in and you add hard data assumptions, anecdotal assumptions, and educated guess assumptions. So hard data-wise, we needed to go to the Census Bureau's website and find the Kern County male population, then figure out what percentage is aged 40 to 50 and what percentage is 100,000 or above. Another thing we could have done that we didn't do is the percentage who are adult male professionals. So we could have also taken a look at all of the different occupations of people and just chosen those which are sort of white-collar professionals or education professionals or whatever we wanted to do there. But I didn't in this case. I just limited it to the male population, a percentage for age and a percentage for income level. Then anecdotal assumptions, total spending, $150. So that's right in the middle of the $100 to $200 in the customer vignette that I said I was willing to pay for a night out. So that anecdotal assumption comes from the price information in your customer vignette. And then finally, educated guess assumptions. I gave you guys an example before of thinking of 5 places that I like to go. In this example, I thought of 10. So I assumed a 10% market share instead of 20% because I thought of more potential places I could go off the top of my head. So you're going to document those 3 things and then multiply these numbers together. So 440,000 times 12.6% times 9.3% for the amount that are above $100,000 a year times $150 times 10% market share. If you multiply all those numbers together, it's 77,000 and change in potential revenue per game from the segment that looks like me. So there's footnotes down here for where the data came from. I want you to do that in your example as well. Footnote where your data came from, and then you're done. And we'll go through an example. Once I'm done with the slides, we'll go through an example of that in your case analysis template too. Market sizing example for the condors. For the business segment instead of the customer segment as an example. If the product or service were advertising in the program, so the condors don't just sell tickets to individual consumers, they also sell advertising space in their program to different businesses around Bakersfield. So again, that's something that you guys would decide yourselves what the product is. Decide the geographic area. Again, it's Kern County. The customer profile comes from your customer vignette again. In this case, we're not talking about individual person demographics. We're talking about the demographics of businesses. So the most important thing is what industry they're in. In this case, I used the example of clothing accessory stores. So stores that sell clothing accessories, hats, ties, socks, things like that. Jewelry, it's NAICS code 448150. So we want to find all the companies that are that code in Kern County. So we went to the county business patterns database and looked up that code and found that there were 7 of those stores in Kern County. In the customer vignette that we put together talking to sample companies, we found that they'd be willing to spend about $500 for advertising in the program, and we're going to assume a 50%. There's not that many stores, so you assume a 50% market share since it's so few of the type of target we're looking for. So 7 stores times $500 times 50% is about $1,750 in potential revenue per game from businesses in the clothing accessories sector who want to advertise in the program. So those are 2 examples of market sizing that you're going to do for your case analysis template. We'll go through and fill those out in a second again as well. Talking a little bit about generic competitive strategy as well. So, in addition to knowing the characteristics of your target customer for business level strategy, you also want to know what kind of differentiate what kind of what kind of decision factors are you targeting when you're putting your products and services in front of customers? So there's really 2 options. Are you trying to go for a low cost strategy, or are you going for a differentiation strategy? So in addition to knowing the characteristics of your target customer, it's also important to know whether you're trying to compete on cost or on differentiation. So if you're competing on cost, there's 2 options actually. One, you can use your lower cost edge to offer lower prices and increase your market share by offering lower prices in the competition. Or you can maintain your present price and be content with your market share, but use the low cost edge to earn a higher profit margin on each unit sold. So competing on cost means that in your operations, in your production, you actually are able to achieve lower costs than any of your competitors. So Walmart's a good example of competing on cost. They've fine-tuned their distribution chain to the point where they can offer lower price. They have lower costs in their distribution chain than anybody else, and they tend to pass that on with lower prices. Robert Half, one of the companies I used to work for, also had a low-cost strategy. They had economies of scale in the development of a database of potential consultants, potential people, job candidates. So we were a recruiting company, a headhunting company, and we had a very large database of potential candidates for jobs and a very large database of businesses who were looking for people. But instead of using that economy of scale to offer lower prices, we used it to have a higher margin. We had the same prices as pretty much everybody else in the business, but we made more profit for every deal that we closed because our costs were lower. So that value was passed on to shareholders rather than customers. Generic competitive strategy differentiation. So you can either compete on costs and having the lowest cost possible, or making a product that is different and better than your competitors. These are the two ways to compete. You tend to use a differentiation strategy when buyers' needs and preferences are too diverse to be satisfied by a standard product or service. So if there's lots of different customer needs and wants and lots of different customer segments, you tend to have differentiation focus for the companies in that business rather than cost focus, because there's too many different types of product for any one company to be able to gain a cost advantage in the production of one of those several different products. Differentiation strategy incorporates differentiating features that cause buyers to prefer the firm's products over brands of rivals. So you're including features, benefits to the product which are different and better than your competition. It's very important not to spend more to achieve differentiation than customers are willing to spend. This is a great example from Globus, the practice round. I can't remember which group it was, but one of the groups had a quality of camera which was way higher than all the rest of the groups for entry-level cameras, and a price that was way higher as well. And even though it was a great quality product, customers just weren't willing to pay that much money for it. So you only want to differentiate as far as customers are willing to pay for that differentiation, not any further than that. In general, the most important distinction between generic competitive strategies, in my opinion, is low cost versus differentiation. But there's a little bit more complex way of looking at it that comes from your textbook. That basically is looking at low cost versus differentiation on one axis here, and looking at market coverage on another axis. So you can either have a broad market or a targeted market, and you can either have low cost or differentiation. So that means that ends up giving you 4 different types of generic competitive strategy, and the book talks about a 5th, and that's being the best cost provider. So best cost provider basically means that you're not the lowest cost, but you have a competitive cost. You're not necessarily the only company that has the features and differentiation that you're offering, but you're one of the only ones. It's a combination of both approaches, and it's a combination of targeting a broad market and a specific market. But that is a more detailed way of looking at generic competitive strategy from your textbook, as opposed to the way I usually go through it in my lectures. Cost leadership strategy. So if you're going to focus on low cost as your strategy, things that you can do as a company to be able to pursue a low cost strategy: you can standardize your product. You can have economies of scale with high fixed costs and low variable costs. You can focus on low input costs, so the raw materials that you use for your product or service could be particularly low. You can focus on efficient scale facilities, so the manufacturing or production facilities that you have, you can focus on making those efficient and scalable. You can invest heavily in technology. That always helps to improve the overall efficiency of your operations and drives costs down. You can build in mechanistic feedback into your production operations. You can exercise strong control over the product, so that the greater you focus on your manufacturing operation and controlling all the features of differentiation in the product, all the different cost inputs to the product, the stronger control you have over the product, the more you're able to focus on low-cost strategy. And a lot of times what will happen with a low-cost strategy is that the company will offer low prices to their customers. This is a nice chart here from your book on different value creation activities, things that you can do instead of a bullet point list. This is divided by different areas in the company. So these are value creating activities here. So these are sort of variable costs here and fixed costs here. These are overall administrative operations for any business at any point in the value chain, and then these are different stages of the value chain for most businesses. Finance-wise, if you manage financial resources to ensure positive cash flow and low debt costs, that allows you to pursue a low-cost strategy. Looking at efficient hiring and retention to keep costs low in your HR. Developing efficient, cost-effective MIS operations, so your IT systems being cost-effective is another way to be able to focus on a low-cost strategy. Good relationships with your suppliers to keep your costs of your inputs low. Economies of scale, like we said before, in your operations. Focusing on low-cost transportation options in your distribution. Lowering your prices and targeting your advertising are two ways to lower costs in your marketing function. And then finally, for follow-up service, efficient follow-up and reducing returns of products are two ways to focus on lowering costs in your customer service function. Differentiation strategy actions. If you're going to pursue a differentiation strategy instead of a low cost strategy, what are some of the things you can do? You can focus on the customer relationship. You can compensate your employees based on customer satisfaction. So the more customers are satisfied, the more money employees make, basically. You can focus on high quality inputs, so the raw materials you use to make your product or service, you can focus on making those the highest quality possible. Quick and customized response and delivery. So rather than focusing on a particular low-cost transportation option, you can focus on making the actual responsiveness of your delivery of your products and services as quick and customized to each individual customer as possible. You can invest in basic research, so just basic researching how to make a better product. Not necessarily how to improve your production facilities, but just how to make a better product in general. Investment in that R&D can help you pursue a differentiation strategy. Subjective feedback, building subjective feedback from customers into your product design process is another good way of targeting a differentiation strategy. And then finally, organic control. Organic control over your operations is another way of targeting differentiation strategy. Usually tends to lead to higher prices. examples in the same format of things you can do in each of the functions to pursue differentiation instead of low cost. Finance, make long-term investments in developing new technology. HR, you're going to recruit really high-quality employees. MIS, you're going to focus on the quality of your IT systems rather than the efficiency of your IT systems. Supply chain management, you're going to focus on the highest quality inputs or raw materials as possible. Operations, you may focus on flexible operating procedures or customize operating procedures to be able to customize your products to different customer needs. Distribution, you're going to focus on rather than the transportation cost, you're going to focus on the ability to customize and speed up delivery to individual clients. Marketing, you're really going to invest in brand name differentiation. So the associations that the customers have with your product or service emotionally, the stronger those are, the more you're able to charge a differentiated price. And then finally, for follow-up service, specialized customer service personnel who really go the extra mile for your customers is a way to focus on differentiation strategy. So with the 5 minutes that we have left, I wanted to discuss briefly recap the three things we talked about. We talked about customer vignettes, we talked about market sizing, and we talked about generic competitive strategy. So generic competitive strategy, like we just going backwards rather than from the beginning of the slides. Generic competitive strategy, we just got done talking about, it's either low cost or differentiation. Customer vignettes, we talked about, is basically the process of going out, listening to your target customers, and putting together a summary on one page of what different features and factors that kind of customer is looking for. And then based on that customer vignette, we're going to do a market sizing. So let me pull up your case template. So if we scroll down in the case analysis template, Hamburg strategy we've talked about, driving forces we've talked about, key success factors and competitive strength assessment we've talked about. Now, market sizing. So, so one of the groups, tell me again what company you're focused on. I can't remember. Macy's? Okay, Macy's. So, what's a product or service that Macy's might offer? Huh? Clothing, yes. There's a lot of different kinds of clothing. What type of clothing in particular? Men's clothing. Okay. Huh? I want it to be relatively specific.
What if there's more than one product with the department store? Just choose the one that's most strongest.
Whichever one is both common and easy to get information about. So for men's clothing, you might look at suits. You might look at dress shirts. You might look at slacks. Depends on which is the easiest to do a customer vignette on. So this is going to be men's clothing, country, region, or locality. What do you guys want to look at? Bakersfield, Kern County, state of California. Bakersfield. And let's assume that you've already done a customer vignette. So you've talked to, do any of you guys shop at Macy's sometimes? Okay, so, huh? Okay, so write up a customer vignette of yourself. Huh? It's just as an example for this exercise. So let's use you as the target customer here. So this is female. Oh, men's clothing is. Okay, so let's focus on Raymond instead. So male. What's your, huh? 40. So we're going to say 35 to 45. And it's personal information about. And instead of looking at income level, we'll just look at the banking sector. So 35 to 45-year-old individuals, males in the banking sector in Bakersfield. So for the hard data assumptions, we're going to go to American Fact Finder. And we start by typing in, so that you just click on, there's a link in the template. Click on that link. It'll take you to this page of the Census Bureau right here. You're going to type in Bakersfield, California. It's actually Bakersfield City, California. And click Go. And you'll notice on the left-hand side here, lots of different tabs for age, education, income, etc. So we need information on 35 to 45-year-olds. So we're going to go to age and click on age and sex. And that'll give us a report of the total population in Bakersfield in different age segments. So 40 to 40, 35 to 39 and 40 to 44 are the two that we need. So that's, and then the male population is, the total male population is 179,681. So we're going to put 179, I can't remember the exact number, but 179,000 total male population. Then we're going to put down here percent 35 to 45 and percent in the banking sector. And for the banking sector, you're going to click on I believe you're going to click on income. Huh? Business education. Business and industry, occupation by sex and median earnings. You're going to get a percentage for people in the banking sector. Ray's going to ballpark about how much he's willing to pay for a suit or a pair of slacks or whatever, and put that number here. And then you're going to do an educated guess of how many other places are there that you can shop for men's clothes. If you come up with 4 off the top of your head, for example, then that's going to be a 25% assumption here. Multiply everything together, and when you're done, change all the font to black and delete these instructions down below.
How many things do you have to have in the customer profile?
Huh?
How many items do you have in the customer profile?
At least 3.
At least more better, not better?
No, 3.
3.
And that's it. I'll see you guys on Thursday. Yes. Huh? The case analysis templates due by the end of the semester.
So
Yes.
I thought the writing assignment one was due last night,
Mhm.
so I emailed you just like a random
Yeah.
article that I did. Should I redo it and do the cover letter?
No.
Or, are you sure?
Okay. Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because
You already
I can.
you already put the work in for the
okay.
other one, so it's
okay.
fine.
I just want to make sure, so we don't have to redo it.
Okay, just have a clarification next
Yeah.
time.
I'll give you credit for doing that anyway, since you already put in the work on it.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
Pastor,
Yes.
how do you find the collaboration